Hello, and welcome to our webinar on using ESSER funds for building strong relationships in elementary school. My name is Caroline Moore, and I'm an associate at Education Resource Strategies. First, a little bit about ERS. We're a national nonprofit that partners with district, school, and state leaders to transform how they use people, time, and money to prepare every child for tomorrow. To further our mission in this moment of response to the disruptions caused by COVID-19, ERS has created a series of guidebooks to support districts in implementing high-impact strategies using stimulus dollars with an eye towards sustainability. We're so excited to highlight shining examples of transformational work happening right now across the country, of districts and schools making intentional efforts to support students and improve schools now, while also engaging in critical conversations and shifts that ensure the sustainability of these strategies once short-term revenue streams run out. As a result of the pandemic, we're seeing reports from across the country of drastically intensified student need. By strengthening student-staff relationships and social-emotional supports, school districts can help students access grade-level learning and stay connected to school in the long term. And we're going to show you how. Our strategy guide helps district leaders who are looking to strengthen student-staff relationships and social-emotional supports they provide their elementary school students, organize resources to do so in an intentional, strategic, and sustainable manner. Today, we will discuss the research-backed elements of strong SEL programs, talk through some key staffing and scheduling decision points, and provide some concrete examples of what this might look like in your district. We'll also talk about how districts might use short-term federal stimulus dollars strategically to invest in these systems for the future. As I'm sure everyone watching this knows, students of all ages are experiencing unprecedented social and emotional needs in the wake of the pandemic and months or years of hybrid or virtual school. Students experience isolation, and many experience traumas directly related to the pandemic, including loss of loved ones or extreme financial instability. Black students in particular also experienced and are still experiencing intense race-based adversity, discrimination, and stress. Addressing these issues is incredibly important, and stimulus funds give schools the opportunity to do so by strengthening structures for social-emotional learning, development, and support. Research on this area has converged on several key findings. This type of learning is and should be a core function of schools. It has been proven especially important for students who have experienced trauma and adversity, and so is even more crucial as we try to design equitable schools in the aftermath of the pandemic. Research suggests two different types of SEL instruction are key to producing positive impacts for students, both emotional and academic. First, dedicated explicit SEL instruction can improve student skills, attitudes, behavior, and academic performance. Then, integrating these social-emotional skills into academic instruction throughout the rest of the school day can strengthen or solidify these benefits. This might look like emphasizing persistence and a growth mindset as students may encounter challenges in reading or math, or helping students navigate peer relationships. Another key factor is relationships between students and adults. Having a warm, accepting, supportive relationship with teachers improved academic achievement more than any other school climate indicator in one study. Finally, in addition to embedding SEL and strong relationships into the school culture for all students, the ability to provide more intensive mental health supports and engage families regularly strengthens a school's ability to have a positive and safe climate. This research suggests that strong investments in Tier 1 structures like the ones we just discussed build an essential foundation, a strong school culture that could create lasting change for all students, including those that ultimately need higher tiers of support. As we've seen student needs increase, it seems like common sense to invest more heavily in Tiers 2 and 3, for example, by providing additional counselors and clinicians. But Tier 1 practices are possibly even more critical. If strong universal supports are not in place, more students will be referred out to Tiers 2 and 3, and then funding the needs for those students might invoke a corresponding divestment in the Tier 1 environment, and this can become a vicious cycle, where ESSER gives us an opportunity to strengthen the universal supports, which ultimately can increase effectiveness across all tiers. Research and emerging practices indicate several key areas of investment for strong relationships and social-emotional development and supports. These are first, incorporating, as I mentioned, dedicated and embedded SEL instruction into the school day. This will require investing in specific materials for the dedicated time and potentially adjusting core curriculum, teacher practices, or daily schedules to embed this learning. Second, developing a school environment that is physically and emotionally safe and fosters strong relationships, building and strengthening school-family connections, and finally, connecting students to more intensive counseling and mental health supports as needed. So now we're going to drill down into each of these components a little bit. Finding time for SEL instruction requires spending on the 5 related areas listed here. Strategic schools and systems will invest in all 5. Incomplete or piecemeal investments will be less effective. So in one school, this is what it might look like. An elementary school might choose to invest in a longer SEL block 3 mornings a week. During this time, the homeroom teacher leads a lesson from the school's SEL curriculum. The skills covered by that lesson are then picked up by teachers within the core curriculum throughout the day. For example, teachers might choose to emphasize certain peer relationship or teamwork skills in small group time. Teachers plan for both the dedicated SEL lesson and the integration of skills throughout the week in their weekly collaborative planning meetings with the support of experts. And finally, one staff member at the school or maybe at the district in a smaller district could be the appointed expert around the rollout of the curriculum, training, and progress monitoring. But in order for students to really absorb these social emotional skills that are being taught in the classroom, they need to feel safe and welcome in a relationships-based school environment. Investing in relationships between students and staff can take a number of different forms. Some common ones are outlined here that we've seen in schools we've studied. Often there's collaboration or learning time for all staff around shared routines, practices, and values, which may be school-wide values or linked to the SEL curriculum. Shared student collaboration time can also be used to develop in-class supports for students who may be having social or behavioral difficulties. In addition, teachers might dedicate regular time to building their classroom culture, like prioritizing morning meetings each day. Or schools can institute building-wide routines like selecting students of the week or having some type of reward or incentive each semester for students or classrooms demonstrating positive culture. And there are even more examples listed here and more details on a lot of them in our full guidebook. Regular family engagement also needs to be a priority in order to build a strong school climate. Here are some categories of ways we've seen schools approach investment in this area. For example, in the early days of the pandemic, some districts had their family engagement staff provide more direct support to families than ever before, including providing technical support for students accessing remote learning or playing a stronger role in connecting students and families to local resources so that they could access food or medical or mental health services. And while the need for some of these services outside of the school has reduced as students return to school full time, the district took this opportunity to build strong relationships with local organizations and families that can continue on. The last area of investment we see is counseling supports, most often targeted at deepening Tier 2 and 3 mental health services. The ways we've seen people invest here won't be surprising. The most straightforward way to invest is on top here by hiring more clinicians. But we'd highlight two things that really tend to separate strategic approaches. One underlies the second bullet here and is about having a strategic approach to leveraging resources outside of the school building. One highly effective and sustainable way to use ESSER funding is to invest to build up connections that can remain even after ESSER sunsets. The second is that there should be deliberate attention to bridging between Tier 2 and 3 supports and the Tier 1 environment. A school leader once told us that he was struggling to solve for the fact that certain dynamics between a teacher and a student often were the impetus of the need for Tier 2 support from a counselor or social worker. But if we then send the student back into the same Tier 1 classroom without solving for these dynamics, we haven't achieved much for that student. Clear communication structures between clinicians and teachers, often through the shared student time we describe in the last bullet here, can both strengthen individual student supports and improve teacher practice over time. As I just alluded to, the availability of ESSER dollars and the particularly high levels of student need right now might mean the next couple of school years are an ideal time to invest in additional mental health or family engagement staff. However, it's also a critical time to pilot and evaluate ways to sustain strong SEL programs and relationships in the long term. To expand on what I mentioned on the last slide, building partnerships with local organizations or mental health providers might require investing in additional staff time now to research and solidify these partnerships. But once that's done, these partners will be able to provide support you need in an ongoing way. Or we might need to use some counselor time now to support teachers in integrating trauma-sensitive practices into their regular Tier 1 instruction. And then these practices can stay behind in every student's classroom, even if counselor staffing eventually has to be scaled back. Investing in an SEL approach also requires more than just financial resources. You'll also need to think about two main scheduling implications. First, in order to embed SEL instruction and culture building practices into the student day, you need to actually schedule the minutes around all of the other things your students have. Secondly, you need to find time for staff to receive professional development and collaborate with each other to engage in all of the structures and learning we just discussed. So to close out today, we're going to jump into a couple examples for how to achieve each of these scheduling goals. Typically, elementary classrooms can engage in explicit SEL instruction and culture building routines by repurposing existing opening and closing time. This could look like a daily morning meeting or community circle and daily closing routines before dismissal. This is a simple way to build routine and relationship strengthening into students' days without reducing the instructional minutes they need to receive. If you're using an SEL curriculum that calls for periodic longer blocks, you might have to make trade-offs to maintain weekly instructional minutes for each content area. On each SEL block day, which is twice a week in this example, but may vary based on your curriculum, the morning SEL time is lengthened and the small group instruction later in the morning is shortened. This means the SEL blocks don't cut into the core instructional time, and then small group instruction on the non-SEL days of the week both strengthen students' academic skills and allows them to work on growing relationships with their peers in a small group context. To find time within the day for your teachers to learn and collaborate together, there are a variety of strategies. You can see an overview of some of these examples here on the slide. Remembering that including counselors, clinicians, or special ed staff and shared student collaboration time when possible can be very helpful in planning supports for individual students. So some of these examples, like extending enrichment once a week or having regular early release, will depend on your staffing and budget context. So for even more depth on each of these examples, including schedule views and trade-offs to consider for each, you can see our professional learning guidebook and webinar. So that wraps up our discussion today of supporting strong SEL practices and relationships in elementary schools. You can find even more content on this topic in our full guidebook, including more on how to sustainably use short-term funds and specific examples of tools and curriculums you may consider adopting. We greatly appreciate all the work that you're doing for students and hope that you found today's webinar to be thought-provoking and helpful as you embark on expanding access to SEL in your elementary schools. We'd love to keep in touch, and if there are ways that we at ERS can support you or learn from you, please reach us using any of the methods here on the screen. And a reminder that this is only one in a series of high-impact ESSER investment strategies that we've created guidance on. We'll be diving into strategic spending, staffing, and scheduling models on other topics like tutoring and targeted academic supports in future webinars. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.